Well, to speak more on this, let's now speak to Defence Analyst Dean Wingrin. Dean, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. Just listening to the Minister there, Ronald Lamola, calling it a groundbreaking resolution. So in the days following the deaths of those 18 SADC troops, 14 of which were South Africans, we got the understanding that the withdrawal of the troops at that time would be worse than a surrender. What then is your reaction following this particular decision to terminate DRC, as well as to pull back the troops from the eastern DRC?
Good afternoon, and I certainly welcome the decision. I think given the circumstances, it's the only decision that the SADC leaders could come to. The situation of the South African and our fellow Malawian and Tanzanian SAMI DRC troops is really in an untenable situation. They're completely surrounded by the Rwandan-backed M23 rebels. They're confined to base. And today is actually the 50th day since that fateful 2 days when, as you mentioned, the 14 South African soldiers were killed. And I've always held the view that if you cannot support our troops, properly fund them and capacitate them, and sort of it was demonstrated yesterday with the defence budget that it's actually gone backwards and the Defence Force received less funding, that then they must be pulled out, and until such stage as they can be properly equipped and funded.
I wonder then if you can speak to us, what are we likely to see in the coming days? Because we do understand that this will be a phased approach, to bring back the troops to their various countries. Hundreds of semi-DRC troops, including, of course, South African, remain, as we understand it, under the M23 control in Sake and Goma. One would understand that the situation there is a sensitive one at this stage. What do you think we are likely to see in the coming days?
Well, up to now, M23 Rwanda, they would have agreed for the South African and our SADC partners' troops to leave Goma and Sake, but it would have had to be through Rwanda and without the equipment. And South Africa has substantial equipment in the theatre. So I think it was the right decision for South Africa to say, hold on, let's remain there until such stage as we've got formal decision on the future of the mission, which came through this morning. The mission will be terminated. So now you could say the difficult part comes. It's the negotiations with M23, with the Rwandan government, and also the Congolese government will probably also have to be part of that. But hopefully, given that the mission is now terminating, it will give a bit of face saving to all parties to the agreement for our equipment also to be returned. And that's not going to be a very easy process to return. It's at the airport runway at the moment, the rebels say that it's unfit for purpose. I do believe there's about 4 different holes in the runway, quite far spaced apart, but it shouldn't be too difficult to repair that, and some lighter aircraft can land in between that or around it. But it requires the opening of the airport, which the rebels to date have been dead set against. So with the withdrawal of the mission, hopefully we can have the airport open, because airlift is the only way that equipment can be returned, and it'll be the quickest way for the troops to be returned as well. But it's going to be a long process. It's going to be an expensive process because South Africa doesn't have organic logistics and transport aircraft. So the charter flights is going to have to continue, and there's going to be very many of those. And so hopefully we'll see over the coming months some sort of termination and repatriation.
Yeah, I would imagine once that process is over, we know, of course, that in previous occasions, the DRC, particularly through its president, President Felix Tshisekedi, had previously, not wanted to be in any form of, dialogue or engage, particularly with the M23. How important then should that process begin? As, of course, we've seen with that announcement that was made, after Angola announced the peace talks between the DRC and Rwanda-backed M23 would then commence. How important would those dialogues be between those, parties, particularly as we also consider the tensions between the DRC as well as Rwanda?
Yes, well, since the takeover of Goma by the rebels, the SADC mission hasn't been involved in any of the fighting. But we mustn't forget that South Africa is still contributing to the UN MONUSCO mission in the eastern DRC, along with a dozen of other countries. So that's an entirely separate process. So because the SADC mission is terminated, the UN mission at this stage was meant to terminate at the end of last year, but has now been extended to this year. But they too are in a very difficult position. And as you mentioned, Tshisekedi has been very reluctant to negotiate with the rebels. The SADC communique of this morning specifically mentions that dialogue must be had with all parties involved in the conflict, including state actors as well as non-state actors, which includes the rebels. And I think both SADC and the EAC must put pressure on the Congolese government to open up and acknowledge what is happening. And the only way out of the situation at the moment and to contain it is via dialogue. Both the Ugandan as well as the Angolan processes is the only way forward at this time.
All right, Dean, thank you so much for your analysis and, of course, just your reaction on this story. Defense analyst there, Dean Wingrin.